Dr. Michael McFarland is on the call as well. He's doing double duty this evening, so he will pop in when his board members allow him to. We also have our corporate leader and awesome person, Ty Chapman, who's also on here assisting me tonight, along with our fabulous executive director, Dr. Atiba-Weza. And so we want to welcome you to our evening of Black history, the celebration of us and our culture. And we have some wonderful panelists on the call this evening. And I'm going to start by asking each of them to introduce themselves. And first, we're going to go through an introduction of our panel. And then I'm going to ask them from their lens, why is Black history important? And we're going to start with Dr. Deborah Wortham.
Good evening, and thank you so very much for this opportunity. I bring you greetings from Long Island, New York, where I serve as the superintendent of the Roosevelt Union Free School District. And I have served as the superintendent. Actually, this is my second visit. I served for 3 years, and then I went off to East Ramapo for 5 years, and now I'm back in Roosevelt with another 5-year contract. So it is great to just serve a very diverse community. We have almost 4,000 students in Roosevelt Union Free School District, all Black and brown children. And we intend to, I say that I'm the super and I intend to make a dent. So greetings.
All right, welcome, welcome. And we're glad you're with us this evening. How about Dr. Walter Milton? You're muted.
Yeah, Walter Milton, CEO of Black History 365. I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to serve on this distinguished panel this evening. I'm a former school superintendent of almost 14 years in 3 different states, and I love the field of education. Thank you so much for having me a part of this.
All right, thank you for being with us tonight. How about Miss Kimberly Grayson?
Hi, my name is Kimberly Grayson, and I am the principal of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Early College. That is a 6th through 12th grade school in Denver, Colorado. And we are a state accredited early college because we offer concurrent enrollment college credits to our students as early as 9th grade.
All right, welcome, welcome. And we have one of your students here with us tonight, Kaliah Yizar.
Yes. Hello, my name is Kaliah Yizar. I'm a student at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Early College. I'm a sophomore. I'm also one of the co-hosts of the No Justice, No Peace podcast. I'm one of the co-founders of the Black Student Alliance at our school. I also serve as a director on the Black History 365 Young Solutionist Advisory Board.
All right, welcome. It's always great to have a student perspective with us this evening. So thank you for taking time out to join us. And we have Dr. Basir Mchawi.
Yes, good evening. My name is Basir Mchawi. I'm a longtime educator, activist, and journalist. I currently teach at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, where I teach New York City police officers. And I'm the host and producer of an award-winning radio program titled Education at the Crossroads on WBAI in New York.
All right. So that is our distinguished panel for this evening. As you can see, we have a variety of folks coming to the table to talk about us, our history, and why it's important today more now than ever. I invite you to put questions in the chat as we have this conversation. It's going to be a free-flowing conversation where we want to hear your thoughts about what our panelists are saying to you, what's resonating with you. And Ms. Chapman will make sure that if you put something in the chat that it becomes to our attention. So I'm going to start off with each of our panelists. And like I said from the beginning, I'd like to know from your perspective, why is Black history important? You know, we know our history is important to us every day. We live it, we breathe it, we honor it, and we make it. But, you know, this country, celebrates us as a culture during the month of February. And so I'd like to know from your lens, why is it important? I want to start with our student.
For me, I feel like history is important, especially Black history in particular, because history is always being made. A minute ago was history, an hour ago was history, yesterday was history. As long as it's being documented and you remember it, it's history. And Black history is constantly being made. especially because for me as a person, I know that just looking back at my history and knowing how far my ancestors have come and how much work still needs to be made, that reminds me that history is constantly happening, and the things I do in my day-to-day life are Black history. And as long as that has to do with Black people and us growing and us leaving our mark on this planet, it is Black history, and all Black history is important.
Thank you. In your experience, you're in the 10th grade, so from kindergarten on up, do you remember celebrating Black History Month in your schools?
Yes, and to be honest, I've lived in Kansas and Denver, so I moved to Colorado around 5th or 4th grade. But up until that point in Kansas, I honestly don't remember having like a very big experience with Black history, especially in schools. And for the last few years here in Colorado, it's like they acknowledge it for a month, but then it's not really, I guess, in the place that it should be. And it's not really taught in a way that it's really celebratory. It's more like we're acknowledging Black history for a month and then we're going ahead. So that's why I'm glad right now at my school, we're definitely changing that, because it's something that's not okay for any student to have to go through, to feel like their history is insignificant.
All right, thank you. Ms. Grayson, why don't you follow her up with that since you're her principal, and tell us what you're doing in your school to make a difference.
No, it's always difficult to follow Kaliah after she speaks. Black history is very important so that as a principal, I want to help my students to gain the knowledge and understand the past and the present celebrations and contributions of Black history. History often repeats itself. And if we don't know where we've been and we don't know the contributions that we've made, it's very difficult for my students to understand where we're going and how history is repeating itself, even in common day right now, 2021. And my students have pushed me as a leader to make a lot of changes just over the course of the last year. Within my school, it started with a trip to the National African American Museum in Washington, D.C. We went there in October of 2019, and they took a stance. And they said, the history that we're learning in our school, Grayson, is not enough. This young lady, Kaliah, is actually my niece. And, to have her look me in my eyes and, Auntie, this is not enough. You're not doing enough as my aunt or as my principal. Right. And I had to sit in that, and I had to recognize that what my students were saying was true. And it hurt me to look back into the eyes of my niece, knowing that I am a Black leader and I wasn't doing enough. But I band with them and told them that we would do enough and we would move forward. And from that trip, we have made great gains, to include, and I'm sure you'll ask me questions later, so I'll just make it short. They've presented to the Board of Education. They have changed the curriculum at our school. We sent all of our history teachers to the museum, and all of my history teachers are white. They rewrote all of our history curriculum. 4 young ladies have written a resolution that was passed by the Board of Education for all DPS students, all students in different public schools, where Black history must be included in all content areas, kindergarten through 12th grade. And the superintendent has to have a plan in place by the end of this year. And Denver will be adopting Black History 365 curriculum as part of that plan. These young ladies have received local, national, and international recognition, in addition to having a great podcast. So I'll leave it there, but they have pushed us for greatness at our school.
Wonderful, outstanding. Dr. Wortham, as superintendent in Roosevelt, what are you seeing that's different when you left and you came back? What's different in your district?
Well, actually, it's amazing that you would say that. When my first experience as superintendent in Roosevelt Union Free School District, we had 60% African-American students. And now we have 60% Hispanic students and 40% African-American students. So to follow up on Kaliah, and I would like to be the foster aunt, if that's okay. She is absolutely on her way. That's amazing. We believe in educating the whole child. And by that, we want students who are healthy, safe, supported, engaged, and challenged. Healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually. And the only way to do that is to acknowledge and honor student humanity, if you will. And by that, I mean acknowledging and honoring Black history. I love what Kaliah said, that we make history every day. Every day. I know that in my absence, a student said to me, the murals were painted over. I mean, the murals were historical murals. I mean, they had been in the school for years and years and years. And I said, inhale and exhale. They might have had painted over your past, but they didn't paint over your present, and they didn't paint over your future. So you're right, Kaliah, history is every day. I said, paint about the experiences, Black Lives Matter, paint about Amanda Gorman. So it is important for us to have or to convey to our young people. We did a session today on generational advantage, that our young people have generational advantage, and we have to teach that. We have to teach and let them know that they are authentic, that they're audacious, that they're unapologetic, that they are adaptive. And so through the teaching of Black history, we have to teach them who they are and whose they are. And that way they have the advantage over anything and anyone, and there are no obstacles that they cannot overcome.
Thank you. Thank you for those perspectives. Mr. Mchawi, Dr. Mchawi, let us hear from you.
Well, Black history is something that is essential to our continued development. From my perspective, our people have been engaged in three major areas, three major struggles since the time we have arrived here. We have struggled for self-determination, which in many instances we can consider to be power. And of course, that takes many different kinds of forms. We have struggled for economic well-being, which in many instances has been the struggle for land. We can go back to 40 acres and a mule and attempt to try to understand that. And we have struggled for knowledge. And knowledge, of course, takes the form of education. We can go back to people like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Jacobs, who as enslaved Africans had to go ahead and finagle a way to actually learn how to read and write, but they did so. And now we're in a time where unfortunately our young people still have to struggle to go ahead and attempt to try to gain the skills necessary to be productive in the 21st century. Black history actually goes ahead and provides our young people with a foundation from which they can actually go ahead and proceed and succeed. And it's important that we go ahead and understand that. Much of my actual grounding is in the independent Black schools movement. And as we go ahead and talk further, I'll probably talk some more about that. One of the things we believe is that the independent Black schools movement gives an opportunity to share various experiences with those who work within the public school system, the tax levy dollar system. The Black independent school system has existed for many years, going back to at least the 17th century, and it continues today. And it's something that I think we need to definitely learn from, because many of the experiences within that particular movement give us instruments by which we can actually attempt to try to move forward and propel our young people once again into the 21st century.
Okay, thank you, sir. And finally, Dr. Walter Milton Jr., let us hear from you.
Man, that was the best sentence I ever said, and you guys didn't hear me. uh, Brother Basir said a lot, and I concur with him 100%. Our history is not only incredible, our history dates back to the beginning of time. We come from a group of people who are the movers and shakers of the universe, and we're those descendants. And I believe that it's incredibly vital for us to know who we are because it increases the probability of us telling this and leaving a legacy for our children. And I believe that if any other nation of people had our history, it'll be front page news every day. It's incredible. And I think that we have exemplified major strength. We have gone through some major vicissitudes in terms of the challenges and overcoming degradation and those things. And it's incredibly viable for our young people to know that they are great, that they are descendants of true kings and queens, and they have the ability to lead and to rule. And I think when we inject them into this history, we increase the probability of deep excellence.
Okay. Well, I would like you to touch upon this wonderful book that I have right here in my house that is my new favorite book. And, as a child who grew up in Southern New Jersey, I don't know what I would have done if in my school they put this in my hands. I just don't know what. I'm jealous and grateful and happy for the youth today that this opportunity exists. So can you tell the good people on this call today what this is?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to just acknowledge Ms. Grayson and Kaliah. They have been incredible on this journey. We are definitely the mutual fabric of oneness. And I'm just so proud of Kaliah. I don't know what to do. And I think that she has raised the bar really high for my sons and potential future wives, because she is like there. But I just want to thank both of them and the rest of the family out there in Denver for partnering with us. And I'm extremely proud of them. I just want to tell you that this textbook is a love letter to the world. And I'll tell you where it first started. I was a fourth grader in New York, Rochester, New York. And I remember, my parents were revolutionaries. They were really good at telling us who we are, and that we go back to the creator. I mean, that's us. However, I had a fourth grade experience where my teacher had said, I'm going to teach about Black history. And she started with the benign institution of slavery. And she had all of these Black exaggerated figures, and then a white man whipping a person who was enslaved. And it ushered so much shame and humiliation. I remember going home and I was almost in tears. And I said, Mama, you guys lied to me. They're telling me that we were, all of this. And my mother said, no. And that was a major deposit that my parents instilled in me at that time. And it just stayed with me all through my experience as a superintendent, as a principal, as a teacher. I probably was an outlier because I always made a conscious connection to culturally responsive pedagogical practices and student achievement as it relates to Black children. And, you're always going to get slapped around. And sometimes our people operate from a construct of fear. I didn't have that fear because I knew that the only way that we were going to save our culture and our future is to inculcate in them a high dosage of our true knowledge and our true culture and our true history. And so that was a platform that really did it. And again, this is my love letter to the world. And so it is something that really engages all ages. We have a team of about 70 people. We have images that go back to 1553. We have QR codes all throughout the book, over 1,000 of them that support the research and the writing. We have a lot of deep research, and we unearth things that our people have never known, never heard of before. And we go all the way back from ancient Africa, and we have looked at the word Africa and the etymology of the word, and it takes you to a word called Akubalon, which is significant to the Garden of Eden. So that's how far we go back. We were the first humans of this earth, by far. And then we come all the way up to contemporary times to talk about some of the challenges that we're having right now. And so we wanted to do something very differently. And then we came in contact with Jay-Z's producer, a brother by the name of Dr. Kevin K.O. Cates. He's produced music for Jay-Z, T.I., Drake, Rick Ross. And he said, hey, man, I want to come beside you guys and I want to develop your music for you. So we have 41 songs that really introduce the units in the chapter of the book. And it's just, the music is unbelievable. And so I sent a couple songs to Ty. Hopefully we can play them before we get off, but I'm just really honored, and I'm nothing but a vessel. I don't take any credit for doing this. I think that the creator had to use me to really get this out, but this was something that was deep in my spirit ever since my younger years.
Thank you. Can you tell the good people on the call how they can get a copy of this and how they can get this book in their district? I know you didn't come on here to do this, but I'm going to give you a platform tonight because, you know, this book is wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I'm always shy to do that, but I'll take advantage of this opportunity. Please visit our website at bh365.org. That's very simple, bh365.org. That's B as in black, H as in history, 365.org. And what we want to really say to the world is that, you know, we talk about Black History Month, and we honored Carter G. Woodson in this book. We dedicated this book to his legacy. And also Kathy Hughes, she's been a supporter from us from day one. But one of the things that I want to say, that we talk about Black History Month, but we want to say our history is 365 days a year. Black History Month is nothing but an anniversary for our history. And that's something that we want to do. We want to demand that every household in this nation, in every school district, take a deep look. And we're having a lot of success with districts wanting to partner, because we think that this is the salvation of our culture and our future. And we have ebooks and all that as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Chapman, is there a question in the chat that you'd like us to ask?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Dr. King. First question up is, why do we have a kind of division among Black-skinned people that dilutes Dr. King Jr.'s fight?
All right, how about Mr. Mchawi? Why don't you take that, Dr. Mchawi?
Well, the first thing is there's the issue of identity. We have to understand and know who we are. If we know who we are, then the divisions literally fall away. We are African people. We are not Negroes. You know, we are not colored. We are not, Black is a race, but we are African people. And once we understand that, many of the divisions fall away. If you were born in the Caribbean and you're Black, you're an African. If you were born in Brooklyn and you're Black, you're an African. If you were born in the Caribbean, if you were South America and you're Black, you're an African. If you're born in Europe and you're Black, you're an African. And if we understand that, then many of the divisions fall away. All right. People are very often intent on talking about the differences we have, but the similarities we have from geography to geography, place to place, people to people, the similarities are so much more important than any particular kinds of differences that we have. And having had an opportunity to travel throughout the Pan-African world, I can tell you that we are far more similar wherever we are than we are different.
You know, thank you for that. But let me ask you this. We have been conditioned to the systems that we live in, right, for years. How do we get our young people to embrace what you just said?
Well, the first thing is very clearly beginning to understand the history. You know, if we understand that, for instance, the slave ships went ahead and went throughout the world, and it was just different stops. You know, it's the same as if, in fact, you were on a bus on one level and the bus went ahead and stopped in different places. Because it stopped in different places doesn't mean that the people are different. It just means that the places where these vessels stopped were different. So if, in fact, the slave ship stopped in Brazil, or it stopped in Cuba, or it stopped in Puerto Rico, or it stopped in North Carolina, the people who originally were on those ships were the same people. Now, over time, there may have been things that have been done to condition us to think that somehow we're not the same people any longer. But the fact of the matter is that if in fact you experience the Pan-African world on a very high level, you understand that once again, the similarities we have are far more important than any differences.
Right. Kaliah, do you want to respond to that?
Absolutely. And like I want to kind of put it, I don't know how to put it into words, but I feel like just to add on to the original question of why Black people feel so divided, because a lot of times, like this goes all the way back to slavery, where like they used to sell, like if you had more Eurocentric features or if you had lighter skin, they would sell you for more. This goes all the way back. There have been so many things done throughout history to Black people to separate us and make us feel as if we're different. The whole categories of dark skin, brown skin, light skin, like this is all done to separate us. At the end of the day, we're all Black. At the end of the day, the white people still see you as Black. We're all Black, and there's no point in trying to create division between each other because we all come from the same continent. We all have the same culture at the end of the day. And I feel like a lot of times it's just like, especially since the very beginning of anything, Black as a race and Black as a culture has been slandered and demeaned to the point where a lot of Black people, especially young Black people I know, they take more pride in the parts of them that are mixed than the parts of them that are Black, because they don't want to have to say that they come from Africa, because how slender it's been in the media and how just dragged through the mud really African descent has been, where some people take more pride in being so-and-so white or so-and-so Hispanic or so-and-so Asian. And I feel like, especially by learning our history and learning how powerful we came from and not letting attitudes of colonialism or attitudes of white supremacy like get down on how you feel about being Black, it would just be so much better if, especially by learning our Black history, we are able to know what gratefulness we came from and not feel like kind of internalized shame in it anymore. Because I know personally, I'm not ashamed of any Black part of myself, but some days I look at myself in the mirror and I see like, oh, I'm getting a little bit darker. And I'm not ashamed of that, but I'm just saying from so long, especially seeing how darker skinned people get treated and how people demean darker skinned people, that's something internalized. And that's something that really needs to be focused on with young people. Because like for example, like as I said before, white supremacy, and the darker down the scale you go, the apparently worse you are. That's something that really needs to be talked about in youth because it affects them mentally, no matter how much we change it.
Right, thank you. And that impacts young people all the time in schools, what you just said. And as proud as you are and as confident you are, you still have those thoughts in your head. So as a student and all these educators that are on this call tonight, what can we do to support you as a student and your fellow students K-8 to start helping you? Because we spend 6 to 7 hours a day with our young children, right? So, we want our parents to embolden our kids and make sure that they know who they are and they're confident in who they are. But what can school systems do? And what advice do you give, not only to the panelists, but to the people who are on this call tonight?
I mean, I feel like there's a lot of ways I can answer this question, but in all honesty, just inspire your students to be radical and like just go beyond self-confidence. Go to the point where like let them know like they come from greatness. Let them know directly that, because in the education system for so long, it's been directly and indirectly told to them that their history doesn't matter and that they don't matter as Black students, and in one way or another they're going to end up in prison or on the street selling drugs. And at this point, if we really want to turn that around 180 completely and give our students hope, we need to let them know what greatness they come from, because there's no point in trying to beat down our students more than they've already been beaten down by society, by some teachers, by the school system. There's so many things going like not in their way because of institutionalized systems that were born on racism. So just encourage your students, no matter what they want to go into, whether it's music, whether it's to be a lawyer, whether it's to do anything, really encourage them, because the last thing they need is more criticism from people who look like them, who really just don't want them to succeed. So empower your students, let them know they can be great, and just be that person over their shoulder guiding them.
Thank you. Let them know they'll be great. Dr. Wortham, you run a system. You're responsible for many, many children. How do her words resonate with you?
Wow, very impactful, Kaliah. Very impactful. I didn't bring any tissues in this room with me this evening. And had I known that you were going to be here in such a profound way, I would have. But I agree with every syllable that she said. As a superintendent, it is important for me to sow. And that means to do exactly what Kaliah said, to deposit into our young people who they are. So I've taken on this commitment to message our young people every day. Every day I do a 3 to 5 minute morning message, and I feature our young people. I feature great things going on in the district. A lot of times the young people are on the message with me, and it seems as though it reaches and it penetrates not only the students, but also the teachers, because we have to protect and cultivate and change the soil if we're ever going to change the perception and the belief of who we are. And I'm tremendously committed to that. Today I read a book, and it's called I Am Enough. And I read it to a group of kindergarten kids, some of whom are on hybrid and some are on remote. And the book just says, and I read this book because the artist is an African-American woman. And it was important for the young people to see. If you can't see it, if you can't feel it, if you can't taste it, then you don't have any idea that you can be it. And so I needed the young people to see this artistry. And so we showed those pictures and we talked about it, and the young people just caught on to it. They just said, I can do it. I am enough. If my hair is kinky, I'm enough. If my hair is straight, I'm enough. If I'm short, if I'm tall, I am enough. I really drive home the fact that we have been told so many times about our zip code. We've been told so many times about generational deficit. And my goal is to change that tide and to have our young people articulate and believe beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt through work, through hard work. Hard work makes a difference. And we say, think you can, work hard, get smart. When you believe that you can, then that sets off that energy that gives you the stamina to go through. Our part of our strategic plan is that we are creating systemic stamina. I don't have time for people to give up and not to move forward. I don't have time for the obstacles. Move them out of the way. Our young people are going forward. So it's through those morning messages, it's through changing the belief system and doing it with fidelity. From the time kids register until the time they graduate, they hear the message, they hear the growth mindset, they hear what the language of a fixed mindset is like, and do away with that. Ear training, we teach them how to believe and how to surround yourself with people who believe in you, and how to go get a drink of water when you hear the messages. Those kids, get away. We don't want that to enter into your thinking, into your being.
Okay. Thank you. Ms.
Uh,
Chapman, do we have another? Oh, you want to go? Go ahead, Dr. Milton.
Oh, no, I was just complimenting my sister, Dr. Wortham. I said, that's powerful. Her words really resonated with me. But if I can just add, I think that there were 3 major tactics that were used on us. And I think it still holds true today. And that was victimization, I think genocide, and the most deadliest one of all, the whole tactic of divide and conquer.
Thank you. Are you still talking?
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I saw the square come up. Ms. Chapman, is there another question in the chat?
Yes, Dr. King. First of all, Kaliah, you are going to have so many aunties and uncles when this is over. Someone put that in the chat because everyone is loving your comments. Thank you so much for being such a strong young sister. From Dr. Patricia Ackerman, who is a past president of NABSE. She had a question. She said, is NABSE prepared to advocate for the infusion of African-American history in teacher preparation programs at U.S. universities?
You know, I love it, Dr. Ackerman, and you know how I feel about you. And I know how you can get things done. So I will be calling you to make sure that we make that happen. And I'm sure Dr. McFarland's got his earbud listening to this right now. So yes, NABSE will commit to advocate for this. And you know what? We'll make it easy for him right here, right here. Is there another question?
Another comment, Dr. King, it's we have to be intentional with what we are doing and how we are relating to our children, is the comment.
Okay, great. So Ms. Grayson, talk to us about, from your perspective as a principal, you know, are you using this book in your school right now?
Yes. We're waiting for, we have that book, and, you know, Dr. Milton can tell you there's a middle school book, a middle school textbook that will be released shortly. And then, like, Kaliah held her book up.
Let's see.
Yeah. And there will be a kindergarten through second grade book and a third through fifth grade book that will be released shortly. And so right now my history teachers have taken that book because in the resolution that my young ladies have written, it specifically calls out that we do not want one Black history class, right? Black history is American history. It is US history, and it should not be just in one class. And that's what they were calling out when we were at the museum. Grayson, why is it that we have to wait until high school to take a Black history course or an ethnic studies course, or we have to wait until a concurrent enrollment class to take this? This history, our history, is American history. It is US history, and it should be taught to us, infused in all of our history classes, not just in one class. And so my history teachers have this textbook, and they are currently writing the scope and sequence of it for Denver Public Schools based off of the classes, the US history or the history courses that the high school classes take right now. And so they have looked at all 40 chapters and have aligned it with what should be included in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. And they are presenting that to the district. And then they will be doing the same thing when the middle school curriculum is released. And so, yes, we are moving forward with using this curriculum in our building. And Denver Public Schools is going to be using the alignment that my teachers are creating for their schools as well.
Wonderful. Dr. Mchawi, can you talk to us about, from your perspective, I thought I heard you say earlier that you teach police officers. Do you teach them? Yeah?
Yes, I do. I've been doing that since 2006.
Okay, so what do you teach them?
Well,
because they got a lot to learn these days.
Well, what happened is after a number of the incidents that had occurred in New York, you had several shootings, you had numbers of different kinds of things that happened. And the New York City Council actually went ahead and set aside some money for a special program. So at John Jay College, we have a program where any uniformed New York City police officer can go ahead and take 12 credits. I teach a course called Police Leadership in a Multicultural, Multiracial City. And we start with going all the way back to where law enforcement in the United States begins. And it begins not where most police officers are told. They're told that it begins in London with the Metropolitan Police, which are known as the Bobbies and created by someone named Robert Peel. First law enforcement in the United States is slave patrols. And if we look at what slave patrols did back then, they do some of the same things that the police do in our communities now. As an example, if in fact enslaved Africans would go ahead and gather together, the slave patrol would come and break them up. They were not allowed to congregate. One of the things that the slave patrols did is that they would go ahead, come into your house, and they would search for weapons. Very similar to the things that the police do today. So it's quite interesting, because when we begin to hit them with the reality of where law enforcement comes from, how it's developed over time, what it actually has become, and the similarities between then and now, in many instances, it provides a transformative experience. And the officers who actually come out of our class, they actually, in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases, they understand that policing is far different from what they thought it was. Just to give you an example, we teach them that when an officer comes into contact with someone of African ancestry, that person sees the uniform that they have on. And that uniform represents a particular history. All right. When they respond to a police officer, they do not respond. When we respond to a police officer, we don't respond to that person as an individual. We respond to them as someone who wears a uniform that has a particular history in our community. So as I said, this experience is, it's a different kind of experience in regards to going in and teaching them. I have to say, as an activist, when I came into the program and started teaching in 2006, my interaction with the police, of course, had not been necessarily all good. So I've learned things as well. And interestingly enough, I have to also say is that those officers who probably need this particular class and this program, they do not enroll in it. They can do so for free, as I said, 12 credits for free, but those officers who need it the most do not come into our classrooms.
Right, so it's a volunteer thing.
Yes.
And the majority of the people who come to your class, are they people of color? Are they Black folks?
Well, one of the interesting things is that the demographics of the class are different than the demographics of NYPD. NYPD today is still a majority male, white institution. We have larger numbers of African and Latino students, larger numbers of women who actually go ahead and enroll in the class than in NYPD as a whole. Our classes very often look a little different than NYPD looks.
Okay, thank you about that. Let's talk a little bit about equity. Dr. Wortham, tell me how equity shows up in your district.
So amazing that you would say that. On tomorrow, we will have in our hands, or on our computers, I should say, our academic strategic plan. As I said, I just started with this district in October, and we needed to hit the ground running. So we did that by rallying together hundreds of staff members, students, and community members to come together to come up with our equity policy and to make sure that we have accountability experts systemically. What I really love about this fact is that although we are in a pandemic, we've been able to get people to come together via Zoom, allow people to go into chat rooms and just use this platform to really further the business of educating our young people in a mighty fine way. So we are happy to say that our board has adopted in equity policy. People talk about equality, but that's not the direction that we need to move forward, because everybody doesn't stand at the same place. And so I just want to give this as an example of having an ear test and making sure that people hear, and they can hear when statements and practices don't promote equity. I remember hearing someone say, well, we were able to distribute 400 Chromebooks, and everybody clapped. But wait a minute, what is the population? What's your student population? If your student population is 4,000 students, 400 Chromebooks is not going to make a dent. And if that is your definition of equity, wrong, absolutely wrong. So I believe, first and foremost, equity is a mindset, and that you have to believe that this means getting everybody to the target, So I'm really excited. I'm glad that I have a board that is excited and that's moving forward with the understanding that equity is not only in the classroom, it's in human resources. How many of our teachers are teachers of color? And how many of our teachers believe in our capacity to get stronger, better, and smarter? So my approach is that, first of all, it's a mindset, and then it follows through with your actions.
So I'd like to hear from Ms. Grayson. How does Black Lives Matter movement change your students' district and their focus?
So the students have not, they've asked to partner with our local chapter of Black Lives Matter so that they can interview them on the podcast, but we have not yet been successful in reaching them just yet. And so the Black Lives Matter organization is separate from what the students have been doing with their podcast.
Okay. Dr. Mchawi?
Yes.
Same question. Black Lives Matter, how is it impacting the focus in your line of work?
From my perspective, there's some issues here. When we used to talk about BLM, we would talk about the Black Liberation Movement, which is what extends back in history to the time that we arrived here. Now, of course, when people say BLM, they talk about Black Lives Matter. The movement for me is important, but it is amorphous and in many instances not organized like the organizers of the old days actually organized. They use, for the most part, social media to actually go ahead and move people from demonstration to demonstration. But as the civil rights movement taught us, that you organize people door to door, person to person, people to people. All right. That's what our heroes like Fannie Lou Hamer learned. You know, her transformation was based upon her interaction that went ahead and took place between people. So we've still got a way to go. You know, we're now in a situation where many issues have been raised, but in regards to the resolution of those issues, they're problematic. Let me give you an example. Defund the police. I teach police officers. Can I talk about defund the police to police officers? Not really. But if in fact we talk about the idea that police departments need to be radically restructured, that's a conversation that we can have. Defunding the police is like taking allowance away from a child who's done something wrong. You've gone ahead and defunded your child, but in the same time, the issues that led to the defunding in many instances, they still exist. So we've got to go ahead and really think. And one of the things that has to happen, I believe, is that the newer generations have to get in touch and more in tune with the old guard and their experiences. There's some things that are coming to the fore. The movie that just came out, Judas and the Black Messiah, talking about the assassination of Fred Hampton. That's an object lesson. That's something that young people who are attempting to try to be activists today can learn from. All right. But there's got to be this process. And, older people like myself, I am really a senior citizen. There's no question about that. This gray hair is earned, both in terms of age and in terms of experience. But, we're not afraid to go ahead and interact with young people, but we have to go ahead and have that intergenerational exchange. I think it's critically important.
Thank you. Kaliah?
I agree on the fact that, because I honestly feel like right now, me and all the girls on the podcast, we do believe in Black Lives Matter. Of course, we're Black, but I feel like with the with the way it worked, I feel like many good things have come out of the movement. Like, for example, a couple weeks ago, there was this lady on our Facebook, and if you don't know, because on our podcast, you can see Grace's face, but so basically in our podcast, every episode starts with a trigger alert, and the trigger alert includes, basically the trigger alert is a disclaimer for what mindset you have to watch our podcast and how you're going to come to the conversation. We used to say you have to believe in Black Lives Matter 110%. And this lady on our Facebook page basically said, I feel like it's closed-minded to say that you have to believe in Black Lives Matter. And I feel like just experiences like that, because I've seen that a lot, it kind of exposes a lot of people who are covert about their racism and their bias. Because a lot of people have tried to make Black Lives Matter political when really it's just about Black lives. It's about police brutality. It's about us being treated like human beings. It's not a political agenda. It's not something you can necessarily disagree with without outwardly saying you don't agree that Black life matters and you support police brutality. There's no way to flip-flop that. So I feel like the place that Black Lives Matter has done is definitely done a lot to expose people who won't outright call themselves racist, but they're covert about it. And I feel like Black Lives Matter, the movement in general, it's opened a lot of youth up to knowing that they have a voice with activism. Because I know one issue is that a lot of, when we look back at the civil rights movement and everything that's gone on so far, a lot of students feel a disconnect. Something like a tactic, I learned about this recently, it's very interesting, is that a lot of times in history books, they'll put pictures from the 60s and the 70s and 80s in black and white when they're talking about the civil rights movement. And that's a tactic of trying to make it seem like it was a long time ago and trying to make it seem like this wasn't stuff that was happening when our parents and our grandparents were young. So I feel like a lot of times young activists and young people who want to become activists, they feel like there's a disconnect when really a lot of the people who were fighting for civil rights back then are either really old or a lot of them are still alive. And I feel like what the Black Lives Matter movement has done is open a lot of young people's voices up to what they can do. Now it's just a matter of giving them the resources to do it and letting them know how to do it right, so it doesn't just become a hashtag that fades in and fades out every 3 months.
Thank you. You're in the 10th grade?
Yes,
Amazing.
I'm 15 years old.
Amazing, amazing. I want to hear from Dr. Milton. What do you want white people and others to know about our Blackness?
Well, I think it's important for them to know that, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I don't want to offend anyone, but we are their parents and they need to respect us in that regard. But more importantly, I think it's important that when they find out who we are and what we've accomplished, it really dispels a lot of stereotypes and also it clears up a lot of misconceptions. And I want them to also understand the urgency around what it means for us to be known for the participatory process of building and developing this country. many of the inventions that they are really enjoying, our ancestors did that. And I think that it's important for them to see the genius in us. And I think that with that, I think that it would give some semblance of leverage and clear out some of the challenges that we have to this day.
Thank you. Ms. Chapman.
Yes, ma'am. I'm still stunned by my greatness. I love it. In the chat, we have, what are some ways that we are measuring progress and leveraging our families?
Who wants to take that?
I could try. One thing that I think that we have to get back to our core. Our core is that we are a collective people. And more so than any time that I can recollect, we are embracing this whole notion of self-sufficiency. We're embracing what it means to be connected to our culture and to our history. And we're finding this as we do this work all across the country. It's happening not only here. We just had I think, I don't know if it was yesterday, Kaliah, or the day before, but we had an international celebration of talking to well over 2,000 students from all across the world. We had representation from Ireland, from South Africa. And so I think with this expansive spread of knowledge, it increases the chance for us to come together. And then what's happening is that we're closing some of those diaspora gaps with that have been engendered and forced upon us to believe. And I think that like Brother Basir said earlier, you know, that we are African people. And I think that when we know that collectively, it increases the chances of us being successful, us doing away with some of those challenges that have wreaked havoc in the lives of our community and the lives of the family breakdown, you know, celebrating our men and celebrating our women and our children. And I think that that's vital. But it all is all connected to us understanding completely our culture and who we are and the major contributions that we have made to this world.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, I think it's important for us, all of us, to embrace who we are and our ancestors, right? We still have a problem in our own community around who we are, right? And embracing what Brother Bashar said about we are African, right? Some people say, I'm not African American, I was born in America, right? And there's a negative connotation to that because again, I'm gonna go back to say, we are conditioned to the system we were raised in this country. They did a good job of doing that. And we as a collective have to break that cycle. And I'm hoping that, you know, young folks like Kaliah is going to take that charge and lead it because it's very, very important. Is articulate as she is tonight and expressing how she feels. She told us that she still thinks when she's in the mirror, I'm getting too dark. That came from this system. And it's up to us to make sure that we are providing spaces for our kids to embrace all of who we are so that we can continue to be great. And like she said, you know, it's important for us to tell kids that they're great. And each of us on this call has a responsibility, regardless of what our position is, whether we're educators or community members, grandparents and aunties, we need to constantly tell our kids how great they are and that they can be what they want to be, right? Ms. Chapman, is there another question in the chat?
Yes, Dr. King, there is. How do you bring along the community when they push back? And it's a two-part question. The second part is, does anyone have advice for recruiting and retaining Black teachers?
I want the first part of that question. Brother Basir, can you take that on?
I mean, in terms of recruiting Black teachers in New York,
go ahead.
In New York City, I mean, first, when Michael Bloomberg, you know, became the impresario because we have mayoral control in New York City, there was a marked decrease in the number of Black and brown teachers and administrators in the New York City public schools. You know, that was, you know, just unconscionable. And at this particular point, you know, we're still reeling as a city from that particular experience. Black and brown teachers, especially those who had a great deal of experience, were often harassed based upon the kind of way that schools were being funded. You know, because if in fact you represented a greater salary than someone who was actually going ahead and coming in new, very often your experience was not actually considered in the way that it should. You know, you should have been revered, you should have been treated with respect, and that didn't happen. So, but now, I mean, understanding that this is a reality as we have these Teach for America and all these other particular programs, which in very often seek specifically young white people to go ahead and teach in so-called inner city schools, that, you know, we have to see how we can actually go ahead and reverse that and go to the colleges and universities and tell our young people that education is a career that they really need to consider, that it's an important career, that education is a key. It's always been a key, as I said before, from the days of Frederick Douglass and Harriet Jacobs, who had to teach themselves until now. You know, to be an educator, I mean, it is a noble profession, and that we have to see how we can actually go ahead and project that and convince our young people that that is so. I mean, the other thing I guess we have to do is we have to see how we can, in some instances, increase starting teachers' salaries so that it will actually be something that, you know, our young people need to consider. I think that's critically important also.
Correct. So I can tell the group that NABSE is hosting our first annual National Career Fair, you know, focusing on teachers of color on April 3rd from 10 to 1. And you can go to NABSE.org. If you're a superintendent on the call tonight or an HR person, you're looking for Black talent, we're bringing our membership to the table. So check us out on our website and see how you can be involved. If you're an educator and you're looking for a change or you're looking for a job, please go ahead and sign up. It's free to job seekers and a small nominal fee for groups that are interested. Oh, there we go.
Oh.
Put it on. We're gonna take that plug, right? So this is something that we think is important. It's important to our people. And I'm going to say that in a district that I work in, which is a very large district, you know, we are struggling with making sure that we keep our African-American teachers in our district. And, you know, because we're a large district, we have more than many, but we still find that struggle because our superintendent announced at an NAACP meeting that we had 22 schools in our district, and we have 198 schools in our district, but we still had 22 that did not have one teacher or employee of color in their school. And, you know, I'm glad that that happened because it has become a focus at the district level. Kaliah, did you want to say something? I see your hand up.
Yes, if I may, just from a student perspective, when it comes to Black teachers, I know, especially at my school for a while now, like in different public schools in general, the staff is very white, including teachers. And like I've known for a while now, students work better in a classroom. They and like it's even just hard to put into words, but they do better in school when there are people who look like them. So that's why a lot of times in classroom where it's like one white teacher and 30 Black and Hispanic students, it often doesn't work well because number one, they don't understand, and number two, they may have some biases coming in there, including having a savior mentality that they're doing Black children a favor by teaching them, or that they're doing something good by teaching Black students, which is just a dumb mindset that needs to get blocked off in general. But I think it was mentioned in the chat before, but like throughout history, especially with like segregation in segregated schools, teaching has been made inaccessible for Black people. And I feel like that's something that really needs to be talked about because in my experience, every Black female leader or any Black teacher period I've had, they have affected me in some way. And I feel like it's so important that not only is it more encouraged, like number one, I also was said before, raising wage, because that's so important. That's things that every teacher has experiences with. But I feel like honestly, if that was made more accessible to Black people, period, and the education to become a teacher, period, was made accessible for Black people and that was encouraged, it would allow way more Black people to come into the classroom and affect students of color in more than one way. And just another thing that's come to my mind recently is that a lot of times in district, like, especially in DPS where it's majorly white, and in a city like Denver and Colorado is considered like generally progressive. Like, I remember this one Malcolm X quote, I'm not gonna try to butcher it, but basically it's talking about how like the white liberal is almost exactly like the white conservative is because they're better at hiding it. Like, I wonder if I can find it because it sounds weird when I say it, but that really reflects my experience so far right now, because I know a lot of times, oh, here's the quote. The white liberal differs from the white conservative only in one way. The liberal is more deceitful than the conservative. Both want power, but the white liberal is the one who has perfected the art of posing as the Negro's friend and benefactor. And that was from Malcolm X. And I feel like that's one really, really important thing to talk about, because I'm not going to call anybody out because we have a ton of amazing people in our district who have helped us so much. But when a district poses that they're all for equity and that they're all for helping their Black teachers, but there's no action behind their words, that needs to be acknowledged. And there are two-way systems to point out in our school district specifically, where they want to pretend that they're all for equity and they want to pretend that they're all for their Black leaders. But then when Black principals are being fired, when Black teachers aren't having their requests listened to, that's a big issue that needs to be acknowledged. And I just want to throw that out there because I feel like I wouldn't be using my space properly if I didn't acknowledge that.
Well, Kaliah, this is your space, and you have inspired me to create another space for students across the country to come together and have this same forum, because the student voice is so important. And sometimes we adults think we have all the answers when you guys have them because you're sitting through what we put you through every day. So look for me to reach out to you to help me lead a student panel across the country as well. So thank you. Keep speaking up, sweetie. Ms. Chapman.
Yes, ma'am. Question is, has Dr. Milton, Ms. Grayson, or Kaliah and her classmates communicated with Congresswoman Marcia Fudge or Congresswoman Joyce Beatty as they are promoting Black History is American History legislation?
Dr. Milton, we'll start with you.
I have not at all. But I do want to say, I just wrote the name down and I'll definitely turn it over to my team and we will begin to make that move. And thank you for putting that out there. I do want to talk about something to make a distinction. The state of Texas decided to pass legislation where every high school in the state has to teach Black history. And so what we decided to do as we were developing the textbook, we decided to develop two books. So we have two books. We have one specifically designed for the state of Texas, and it's 100% in line with their TEAC standards. You know, we deal with convict leasing and all of those things, and talk about Black history from the construct of the state of Texas, which is powerful. So we devoted an entire unit on that. And then we felt that it was imperative that we develop a national textbook. And so in that national textbook, we give some time to every state specifically in terms of the Black history and accomplishments that many of our people have made there. But I think that we do have a body within our organization that's really designed to talk to some of the policymakers and politicians. And so that's something that we're definitely going to make a movement on, because I think that this has a propensity to really save so many lives, and specifically ours, and not so much from a physical death, but a psychological, emotional, and social one. And so I'll definitely take this to the team, and we will begin to march towards Marcia Fudge. And if you know how to expedite that process, we would love for you to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know TABSE had something to do with that legislation push as well. And, you know, TABSE is one of our big affiliates in NABSE. So shout out to any TABSE members who are on the call tonight as well. I do have a question. When you say that Texas is making it mandatory, does that mean every student in the state has to take the course, or is it an elective that students can choose to take?
It's an elective, but I think that that's a start to, you know, to have this conversation. In some districts, like Dr. McFarland, they are making it mandatory. And I think that he started this year, and I think that it's really going to expand. But there's a fire that has started, and I think that the ancestors will be very proud of what's happening. And I'm seeing a high degree of synergy and and connection that I haven't seen in recent years that's happening now. I think that our people are becoming more outspoken, more deliberate, and saying, hey, we have a right to stand up and get what's ours, just like anybody else. And I think that's happening. I think a courageous leadership like Dr. McFarland and Ms. Grayson and so many other people like Dr. Wortham and Brother Basir and you, Dr. King, it's amazing. I think that there's something contagious in the air that's erupting. And I think that we have the ability to lead. And I think that we're going to really lead in a manner that's going to surprise so many people. I think we have the takeover spirit. We're rulers. And I think we're getting back to our right minds.
Dr. Wortham, are they talking about it in New York?
Yes, can I just segue to what Dr. Milton said, takeover spirit, and then segue back to Kaliah, that we have to teach our students to articulate and to advocate. In my mind, I believe that we're more than posters. We're more than posters, we're more than placards. We have a message, and we have to provide opportunity and space for student voice. Someone provided space, opportunity, time, articulation to develop Kaliah. She's polished, she's there. I couldn't even speak hardly this evening because I am so mesmerized by this young lady. This is amazing, and this is what we want, but we have to take the time to we want a seat at the table. I tell our young people, not only do I want you at the table, but I want you at the head of the table.
Right.
And we practice and we practice and we practice. Come into my conference room, come into the boardroom, sit in those leather chairs. What does it feel like? What is your eye contact? What's your demeanor? And what is your message? Can I jump over for 1 second, Dr. King, to the question that you asked earlier? What do you do when you get pushback from the community? Well, if you adopt what I really believe, and that is that you get with 75%, as long as you have 75% of the folks with you, then the other 25% will ultimately self-destruct or get on board. At one point in my career, I used to say, I need 100%, I need 100%. What you need is a movement. What you need a group of people who are going to move with you and gain that traction. You can't do this in isolation. I think that's what Dr. Milton said. You've got to have a group. People are not with you. They don't understand. That's what I choose to believe. They don't understand. So take the opportunity to teach, to break it apart, to dissect it, and to help people to understand, be able to communicate, articulate so that they are coherent. I remember when you talked about culturally responsive teaching. Culturally responsive teaching, I try to break it apart so that in every classroom, it's explicit instruction. We decide, I taught it, you didn't get it, too bad. That's not the way to do that. But in explicit instruction, we have the intervention built in so that if you are not mastering the content, then there is an exit point and we go back to reteaching, but not counting students out. And we have to do the same thing for adults too, by the way. I remember we were putting this in place, and all of a sudden I saw these red buttons. And people started wearing red buttons because they didn't want to follow along with the explicit instructional model, because there's a mindset that says, as I said before, I taught it, you didn't get it, I'm done. Not so. But as we continue to develop individuals and change that mindset, we saw those red buttons going away, and then we saw student achievement increasing. So when the community, whether it's the internal community or the external community, as long as we are committed to the cause, whatever it is, and we continue to get that message out there and continue to help people to decipher and to understand, we can't give up. And it's the determination. It's the determination. The other thing, and then I'm going to yield this microphone, and that is that people perform on the level in which they are recruited. You want people of color to come on board, recruit. What do you have to offer? As an institution, what do you have to offer? Do you have job security? Do you have, what is the scale to go from here to there? Make it clear and develop and make your people understand that you are with them and we are all together collectively. This is a collaborative place of learning. It's not a top down.
Thank you, Dr. Wortham. Thank you. I see we have a few minutes left. Ms. Chapman, are there any other questions in the chat?
Yes, ma'am. Indeed, there are. This one is, it's two-part. Does everyone agree with the fact that in Nova Scotia, Canada, Black diversity only refers to American slaves called Nova Scotians, but not the other Blacks? And then another question was, I know Canada is struggling with their racist past. There are artists and activists that speak to this history. Deanna Bowen comes to mind. I believe she teaches in Toronto. So the question itself and then the actual comment.
I see Dr. Milton, you took your mic off before she could finish, so you must have something to say.
Yes, I do. We devoted an entire unit to Canada's Black history in the textbook because we thought that that was a gap in terms of knowledge and understanding of our brothers and sisters here or in America. But those challenges are the same. They're very global. So rather. So the other author, he's Canadian. He comes from Canada. And so we really wanted to take a deep dive into some of the challenges that our brothers and sisters are facing up north. And it's real, it really is. And some of those things are quite similar, but they don't get the large level of press that's given down here. So I just want to acknowledge that person who asked that question, because I want to say that I do understand it, because we had to do some extensive research in Nova Scotia and other areas like Toronto and other parts of Canada, like Alberta, and the history is ugly in some cases, and we reported that out.
I think there's another element that we have to talk about, and that's a historical one.
Mm-hmm.
If you recall that slavery was not legal in Canada, and when Africans would escape slavery, although they could come to a free state, they still would not be free.
Exactly.
And there were two reasons for that. The first was the Fugitive Slave Clause, which is contained in the Constitution. And the second was the series of fugitive slave laws, which were passed by Congress. Those laws said that you were an escaped slave, that a slave catcher could take you no matter where you were. If you were in New York, if you were in Boston, and you had escaped, they could take you back to slavery. So many of our ancestors actually went ahead and escaped to Canada, because in Canada, slavery was illegal. So it was for that reason why many escaped Africans actually settled in places like Nova Scotia. And I think that particular historical piece is important. But there should be no reason why there should be a differentiation between people who arrived through that particular methodology and folks who have arrived later. That, to me doesn't necessarily, make any kind of sense. But of course, it's one that you can understand. We always attempt. Divide and conquer is the thing that has kept us in many instances in the condition that we happen to be in. And it is a strategy that continues, and in some instances, a strategy that is still successful.
Exactly, because we're all Africans.
That's right.
All Africans. Ms. Chapman.
Yes, ma'am. Next question. How do you get families involved in helping to transform attitudes around Black history?
Ms. Grayson, what'd you do?
Sorry, I lost internet connection there for a second. Can you repeat?
Yes, ma'am. It's how do you get families involved in helping to transform attitudes around Black history?
My sister, Kaliyah's mother's a principal right around the corner from me. And we both knew that as we jumped into this endeavor this year, that it was going to be a huge, that it could be a huge issue for our community. So we started at the district level, right? We needed to make sure that our district had a stance on where they stood with Black voices from students, Black administrators, Black teachers, and then our school board created a resolution called the Black Excellence Plan for Students. And once our upper level district leaders created their stance and shared it amongst the district, then we used their words to hold them accountable. So as our community, and I didn't have many, started to fight back with what my young ladies were doing and with the resolution, I was able to push back on the district. This is what you said you were going to do, right? You said you were going to support the voices of my Black students, me as a Black leader, my Black teachers, and I'm going to hold you accountable to doing that. And we know that when we make other people that don't look like us uncomfortable, we know what happens. But you said at the beginning of the school year that you were going to do this. And so I need you to stand firm in your word in what you said you were going to do and support us. And so every time there's a community member that kind of pushes back on us, a parent that pushes back on what we're doing, and they take it to the district level, then I just pull out, because I saved the PowerPoint presentation and luckily everything is on Zoom, right, where everything's recorded. I pull that back out and I remind the district of what their commitment was to us. And then we also explain, like, learning about our history is to change the nation. And we explain that it's to help us to become better and united together. And we go forward with it that way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, I want to take the time to thank our panelists for this wonderful discussion that we had tonight. All of you are phenomenal. Thank you for the work that you do through your lenses in your communities and for our people every day, because Black history is 365 days of the week for us, or of the year for us. And, somebody who was born of an Ethiopian mother and an African father, a true African-American in the sense of the word, I can tell you that my mother's side was never enslaved. And we can trace our family back 10 generations, and I'm afraid to trace my father's back because I don't know what we're going to find. He often says, you don't know what you're going to find. but I see the difference. And it's important for us to do that and celebrate who we are as a people every day. So, NABSE, thank you for supporting us. We appreciate all that you do for our organization. And without you, we are not NABSE. And we are so looking forward to going back to Cali for our 49th annual NABSE conference in Los Angeles, California, from November 10th to the 14th. I'm hoping by then all of you, like me, will be fully vaccinated and that you can join us in person for reimagining education, focusing on innovation, equity, and social emotional learning. Start looking for tickets now, because we are going to get back together and have our NABSE reunion, because we know more now than ever, our work is important to our children. Right. So let's start saving our coins now so we can get on those planes and get to Cali. To my panelists, thank you for your time and your energy tonight. We appreciate you. And Atiba, I'll leave it to you for final words.
Oh, thank you very much, everyone, for having accepted our invitation to join us and for your inspiration, your wonderful words of wisdom, encouragement, and to reaffirm what we always knew, that we are indeed a wonderful people, brilliant people, strong people, and we will endure. We thank you very much for your support of NABSE, and we look forward to seeing you in November in California. Good night.
Good night. Milton, Dr. Milton, can you stay on the call for a minute?
Yes.
And Kaliah, can you stay on the call as well as we close out?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Basir.
Thank you.
Dr. Wortham, thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, NABSE.
Nardos is from Ethiopia.